Okay, well, welcome to our weekly training, our F&I tune-up. This week is actually one of my favorite programs of all time. It's something that I have a personal investment in, so I'll be going through that. But let's get started here. This week, we're going back to F&I product knowledge, going over again, my favorite program, Gap Insurance. And I know a lot of people have a lot of stories with Gap, but I've got a good one myself. But we're going to go through that. We're going to go through how Gap really works. And we're going to talk about some new Gap programs that we've got coming out as well. So here we go. All right, first and foremost, Gap insurance details, things that you need to know as a finance manager that is imperative when it comes to Gap. First and foremost is the 150% of MSRP coverage. Now, this is important for two reasons. One, it's important because it's good to know your program. It's good to know what your program's going to cover. And we're going to walk through here in a couple more slides. We're going to walk through an example on exactly how a 150% coverage works. And the reason I'm doing that is because most of us as finance managers, we know this detail, but I want to make sure that I cover it in good detail for how you can explain it to a customer. Because what we've found and what I've found over many, many years and dating it and growing the gray hairs for it, but is sometimes the way that we explain gap insurance is lost on customers. And so there's a couple different methods that I want to go over, and it all involves, well, most of it involves this 100%, 150% MSRP coverage. I come from the car world, and the car world is starting to bleed over into power sports. And I saw this in my stint in power sports was insurance companies are starting to get, well, they've been getting into, but they're starting to get into the power sports gap arena as well. And 150% coverage is not the same as, oh, your insurance company, oh, I've got gap insurance from my insurance company. One thing that I want to make sure that we mention is that you should have that pitch down. And it's a little bit of a tongue twister, but I've said it enough to where it comes out. When a customer would tell me, oh, well, I'm going to get gap insurance from my insurance company. Okay, so let me get this straight, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. You're going to buy insurance from your insurance to guard against your insurance? Because that's what Gap is. Gap's going to cover that difference where your insurance is lacking. It's going to cover that overage. Things to watch out for, and knowing this 150% coverage is the insurance companies don't train very well, unfortunately, not all the time. I'm not pigeonholing them or anything like that, but they're not going to give the most training when it comes to this. And I've had many insurance agents, even my current one, answer this in, oh yeah, it just covers you if you're covered. It's going to cover your balance. Dive into their contract, and they have a max out of pocket of $5,000. They have a 110% coverage. I found one insurance company, still to this day, I'm not going to name any names, they did 100% coverage. Well, if you're going to do 100% coverage, well, isn't that what you're supposed to do as an insurance anyway? So you're really going to cover nothing, but I have to pay for it. Think about that. So knowing that you have 150% coverage and walking through that, we're going to go through all that. Gap insurance too, loan specific coverage. So it is only for this loan. Now, the reason I bring this up is this is something that gets missed, and this is something that we see on CSI a lot down the road, is a lot of customers don't realize that their gap insurance policy is one of the very few things as a finance manager that we sell that stays with the loan. So if they refinance the loan later, they don't got gap insurance. I've actually had customers who thought, well, I refinanced it, so I just had my gap on the other one, and it doesn't it transfer to my new loan? And that is not the case. So we need to make sure that they know that going into it. Lastly, gap insurance is going to cover up to $1,000 on your deductible for an for an insurance claim. So you're going to get some money from gap insurance on your deductible. So you're good to go there. All right, let's dive into it. Going into the contract. Here's the big thing with the gap contract, and it's right here, this first line. I don't know if you can see my My mouse scrolling over. I don't think you can. Dang cameras, technology, right? Okay, in the top left-hand corner, you see where it says maximum finance benefit. There's that 150% of MSRP or JD Power. That's where that percentage comes from. The next box over, term of gap equals the financing contract. So it's just for that term. You do 84-month contract, 84-month gap. Okay. Maximum limit of coverage. We will cover, gap will cover $50,000 up to 50 grand. That's how much the gap, that's the max check the gap company will write. That is not the max amount financed. We get this confused every once in a while, and I want to make sure that we know that. So the max that the gap contract will physically write a check for is 50 grand. Next box over, the max amount financed. So the max amount you can do for a gap policy is 125,000. So you've got two different numbers there. So you have the max limit coverage, which is the max amount that a gap insurance is going to write a check for, which is at 50,000. And then you have the max amount financed, which is 125 grand. So that's amount financed. That's not what they bought it for. So if they bought it for, a little bit more, a little bit less, they put some money down, however it is, you can still do gap insurance up to 125 grand financed. Okay. Okay, a couple things on this contract I want you to know. This top one I really like to go over because it is just a moral sticking point for me. You acknowledge that you have read and understand this addendum and its provisions. Now, that normally goes, excuse me, that normally goes for just reading the contract. On our gap contract, one little paragraph above this section, it says that you realize you do not have to purchase gap to get financing. And I want to make sure that any and all F&I managers know this, not to do that tactic. Don't go down that road to say, listen, if you want this financing, you have to take this, this, and this. If you're doing that, that's not something that we would recommend. So I'm off my high horse on that one. Okay. The other thing that I want to do, the third dot down, it says gap does not take place of insurance on a covered vehicle. In power sports, some of our lenders, not all, don't require insurance, which if you don't have insurance on something you have financed, I think it's not the greatest thing. I'm not going to say irresponsible, but not something, whatever word is right underneath irresponsible, that's kind of where I feel. Like if you're going to finance something, you probably want to make sure you have insurance on it, because that would be a situation you wouldn't want to get into. I would never want to have a loan on something I can't even use anymore. That would just, oh, that would bother me so much. But gap insurance does not take the place of insurance. So it's important to let our customers know that when they do opt into gap insurance, that, hey, you have to make sure you still keep insurance on this, because it's only going to pay that difference between ACV and what you owe. It's not going to pay the whole balance. So you want to make sure you have insurance in place, because if not, it's not going to work the way that you think it is. So basically what this contract section for me is let's just make sure we're going over a couple of the points with the customers. That way they understand it. And if the customers have questions about it, it's better to get these questions out now than it is later on down the line, because I'll tell you what, I've had some awkward phone calls where people thought that their gap insurance policy transferred to their refinance loan. And that was a very awkward and hard to tell the customer, no, sorry, it doesn't work that way. So I've learned to say these things, and I want to try and take anything that I've had that was awkward or unfortunate in my career and pass it along. So that way, maybe you don't have to run into that. So hopefully these help you out. Excuse me, I'm still fighting something. Okay, here we go. Understanding a gap scenario. So this is just an example. We're just going to walk through it, take a couple minutes to look at this here, just so we understand how all the numbers work and how you can use it. So we got a customer, they owe $47,500. Okay. Something happens, they total it, everybody's okay. I love to say that in this example, everybody's okay. But vehicle's totaled, insurance says, well, we're going to give you 29,000 for it with what all the wear and tear you've had on that. We're going to give you 29. So When we do that, we look at it and say, gosh, JD value's 35,000. Okay. So how do we calculate this? So we have what we owe, what the insurance is going to give, which is way less than what we owe because insurance companies do that. That's how they make their money. And then you got the JD value for the unit. Okay. So we're going to take that JD value of 35 grand, times it by 150%, and that gives us 52.5. So that's the max amount that the gap insurance company would work off of. Okay. So that 52.5. Well, luckily, we only owe 47.5. Only. I love how I say that. Just only 47.5. But you only owe 47.5. So if we take the 47.5 and we look at what the max they're going to do, which is 52.5, we're under that. So they're going to pay out and pay off our loan. Thank goodness. Breath of fresh air. So we take whatever the insurance minus out, which is 29,000, and then that leaves 18.5 for a gap payout, and that's what gap's going to cover. So very simple, very easy, good example, and it's good to have an even number example. And sometimes I've even had finance managers had really good success with having this on a piece of paper, and they would literally just, if the customer needed to see an example, have the example already printed and put it right down on the page. So little helpful tip, that might be something that you guys want to do if you feel that you're running into this a lot. If you feel like you're doing a lot of hand drawing on a or hand calculating, which everybody loves a Sharpie and everybody loves scrap paper, but might be something to have printed out. Just a little helpful tip there. Now, excuse me. So looking at this example, that 18.5 payout, that's what gap's going to cover, and then whatever deductible might have been there. So great to use this with a customer because, as you're going to see in the next couple of slides, one of the main ways that I love gap insurance and when I'm presenting it is to have an example. Because if you go up to a customer and you just say, and you're sitting there on your menu, well, gap just covers the difference between whatever the insurance gives you and, what you owe. Some customers are going to hear that. And even though you said it in somewhat plain English, it's not necessarily going to resonate. So you want to make sure that you have a way of presenting your products that are going to fit some people who are more visual. And sometimes talking insurance, as soon as someone hears the word insurance, they just shut down. They're done. That, well, I don't know anything about insurance, so I'm not going to pay attention. That's unfortunately some of our customers. So having a good example, always a good thing. Okay. Ways to explain gap insurance. All right. I've got a couple of these. The first one is this is probably one of my favorites when it comes to how to present gap. And I would use this in a way when I wanted to get the ball rolling with a customer. If you could just tell you have one of those customers who little standoffish, not giving you a lot of the way, you go into the customer interview and it was like, talking to sand. I get it. It's just, can you talk to me? And you're, yeah, mm. We've all had those customers, and it's just like talking to a tree. Hello, hi. This is a great way to get things going with a customer like that, is to just use an assumptive close and just say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, I see that you're not going to do, what the normal 20, 30, 40% down. Since we're not doing that, which is totally fine. We got you all approved for that. Let's just make sure that your payment's protected with gap insurance since we're not putting a huge investment into it. You're just assuming it already. And by doing that, a lot of customers see it as, I'm not just selling you a product. I'm not just trying to tell you what this is just standard practice. You didn't put 50% down. So I'm going to make sure that we have gap insurance. And I think some lenders now, they're even in like the 70 range, to where if you don't have 30% down or more, or however, I think I said it backwards. If you have more than 30% down, they don't want gap insurance on there. So make sure you understand your lenders with this one too. But if you're in that less category, using this assumptive close is a huge one. The other thing that I really like using is, like we talked about, using examples. Now, you want to make sure you have a good example. And so I've given you one. The person who did your gap training today had an 18,000, actually $612 gap claim. The example from earlier, right here, This was not made up numbers. This was Josh's wife, unfortunately, having an accident on Memorial Day weekend in 2018 in their Toyota Sequoia. So these are the exact numbers that were used. And so this is what happened. And I'll tell you what, I've never driven fast enough because I was at work and drove to where the accident happened, which was about 15 miles away. And I've never driven. I'll tell you what, a RAV4 can do real good work if you need it to. So just so everybody's good there. But luckily everybody was safe. She had the three kids in the car with her. I'll tell this to the day I die. The Sequoia is an absolute tank, and all the airbags deployed. Everything was. It was not a great accident, but the most we walked away with was a couple of scratches. No one had any internal problems, any broken bones, nothing. So, like I said, everybody was safe, everybody was good. But I had an $18,612 Gap check come my way, and it was epic. So, lifelong proponent of Gap, and feel free to use the story because it's relatable. It's something that actually has happened in the world. So, with this though, I also recommend going and talking to your service department because the service department are usually the ones who have to do some appraisals for insurance companies of how much it's going to take to put a machine back together. If you can find those people and get a local story and don't use real names, things like that, but you can talk about, oh, we had this customer and the Gap Insurance helped them out with their razor, with their Can-Am, whatever it is. Great way to get involved with a program like that. And while doing those kind of things, you'll never know what you'll pop up. I mean, I've talked to customers in service about their Gap policy and how it worked and all this other stuff. They ended up turning back into deals once they got that Gap check. Hey, I'm free and clear. Let's go. So great ways to present Gap is, one, be assumptive. Two, have a good example, because I'll tell you what, the example for most customers, that's what's going to sell Gap, is having that example ready. So Gap pairing, every week I talk about programs and how they fit together with the other programs, because the goal is not just to sell one. I want to train on Gap insurance, and I want you to have great Gap penetration, but I want all the other programs to go along with it, because that's what's going to raise your PVR. That's what's going to separate you from good F&I person to amazing. And we're trying to get everybody to the amazing status. Okay. So Gap pairing, think about these things beforehand. A couple examples. One, pairing Gap with payment protection. It's loan protection. So you can even put that on your menu. Hey, loan protection, because if it's in service or if it's getting totaled, you're not paying for the vehicle. So that's why payment and Gap work so well together. A one that might not be thought about a lot, but I love this, and it was Court, one of our founders, who came up with this that I love, is Gap with theft. Adding Gap insurance with theft protection is a great pairing, because you've got protection if it's stolen, and then if it's stolen and then not recovered, they're going to total it out. Oh, hey JD, thanks for joining us, but you mind hitting the mute button? Thank you, sir. um with theft protection, because it goes and gets stolen. Well, the worst thing that would happen with theft is if it gets stolen and it's not returned to you and it's deemed a total loss, using that check from theft to have to pay off your balance, how lame would that be? The whole point of theft is to use that money from theft to go buy a new rig. That's money down for the next one. So pairing it with Gap is perfect. Your loan's going to be paid off. Gap will handle that. Done. Now you got your check sitting here from the theft company. Oh, it's time for a new machine. Money down. So great pairing. Love those two thoughts. And then make sure that you're working with Gap on all your programs to have some kind of pairing. Sorry, if you heard my dogs in the background, I apologize. They go crazy sometimes. Neighbors. All right. Homework for the week, because no good training is ever done without a good amount of homework. This week, just like we talked about, I want you to go and have a good real world example ready for when a customer has gap. So go to talk to your service department. If you've had a gap claim in your life, use that. If you want to use my story, please do. I mean, it was horrific, and I'll tell you what, I still have certain traumas about it this day, just because that 15-minute car ride between you get the phone call that you've been in an accident and then I'm driving to the scene, your mind it goes a million places at once. So feel free to use my example. It was as soon as it was kind of funny. As soon as I got to the scene, saw my kids, everybody was good. Hugged my wife, made sure everybody was happy. Like, got the insurance thing. We're just kind of sitting there waiting for the tow truck because there ain't no way that Sequoia was moving. Um, I was just like kind of silently like, gap insurance, like because unfortunately in the car business or in power sports, you sometimes roll over disequity. I had rolled over a little bit and I knew that gap insurance was going to wipe that clean for me. So talk about a clean slate, let me tell you. But like I said, have a good policy, or have a good policy, have a good example in place, and it's going to make all the difference for you for sure. So, next week, we're going to do another product knowledge training. And then after that, we're going to spend 4 weeks going through menu prep and how to walk through a menu, how to tailor menus, how to present different packages and menu products. So, we've got some good stuff coming our way. Hopefully, everybody's been seeing some good boosts in their numbers with using some of these things. And if you have anything that you need training on or you have some questions about, feel free to email me as much as you like. We're here for you guys to try and help out. So, and I will shoot out an email later on this week. I'm going to do another email on making sure everybody knows like how to go to the YouTube page. All of these trainings are up there. So if you need a refresher or if anything like that, you're good to go. So with that, I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions.